Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mixed Martial Arts. As usual, my name is Austin Shaper. This is an informal type show where we explore the topics of UAP, UFC, and World War III/geopolitical field. Couple of housekeeping notes before we dive in. First of all, today's going to be a World War III episode. I have not done one in, like a week and a half. There have been a lot of events going on, but it's been on the back burner for me. I was covering a lot of UAP stuff and the big UFC fight card that just happened. But we're going to be getting back into the geopolitical sphere today. Before we get started, I'm going to ask a couple things for you guys. They're 100% free and they take 1 second. If you're listening to this on Spotify podcasts or Apple Podcasts today, do me a favor and just hit a 5-star review. Leave a review for us. So I've heard it helps with the algorithm and potentially showing the podcast to new people who haven't already found it. That would be very helpful. Also, if you're listening on YouTube, just hit the like and subscribe button. That helps us a lot. I want to reach 1,000 subscribers, so I'm able to go live with you guys and have a chat on there once or twice a week. And lastly, this is probably the most important one to me right now because I really want this to be more than just a monologue. Why I started this is I'm looking to have conversations and a dialogue with other people who are fascinated in either one of the three, two of the three, or all three subjects that I also enjoy talking about and following pretty much on a daily basis. And that ask from me is that I want you guys to follow my Discord. It's in the description in this video. It's also on the About Me section on my YouTube page. Click it and follow the Discord. It's called Mixed Martial Arts, and it's just 3 chat threads, one for UAP, UFO conversation, one for the geopolitical World War III stuff, and one for UFC. I would greatly appreciate it if you would join it. I think there's only about 6 or 7 people in there. I just started it like yesterday, I think. So hopefully it'll get rocking and rolling. I'm going to be posting like news clips in there and any questions, topics, things you guys want to discuss, all the nuances with any of these 3 subjects. I would love to have a dialogue. I love just streamlining, doing a monologue and be able to share my thoughts and all these things. But it would mean a lot to me to be able to create kind of community of people who are interested in this, and we can just kind of banter back and forth as these stories are constantly breaking in all 3 of these different fields. So I would greatly appreciate that. Jumping into today's episode, I'm going to be rambling because there's so many different ways to approach this. There's so many things going on in the geopolitical sphere game. I call it a game, but it's not a game. It's very serious, but there's so much going on. We're going to start off today with the NATO summit. Today is July 11th, and I believe the summit starts today, and it goes today and tomorrow. So supposedly at this summit, I'm going to read you a couple things that they are going to be discussing. It's basically all going to be about Ukraine and where they're going to go with their support in the fight against Russia. So this comes from the NATO Security General. He says the volume of military support to Ukraine must be increased, which is the biggest challenge. There's a couple reasons why it's the biggest challenge, but we're going to dive into that in just a moment, starting off with the cluster munitions and all that kind of stuff that's coming to the field now. The NATO Secretary General also says that Sweden is going to become officially a full member of the alliance. This seems to be, who else is trying to join? I believe it's Finland. So this is obviously the opposite of what Russia was wanting from this. I don't think when they started this invasion of Ukraine, what they had in hopes were, we're going to inspire more countries close to our borders to join the alliance that's essentially an anti-Russia alliance. It's been that since its creation after World War II, when Russia and the United States were the only 2 players on the board. After World War II, everybody was devastated, and the writing was on the walls that one day there could be a confrontation with Russia and the United States. And excluding the Cuban Missile Crisis, which never went hot, that was the closest we've ever got, and we seem to be here in 2023. We're right there on the cusp again. I would venture to say we're in a worse predicament than we were even in the Cold War. That could be debated, but there's just so much to it. It's a very messy, nuanced subject, and that's why I don't claim this channel. One, I'm not an authority. I'm not speaking from a position of like I know it all. I'm just speaking from I'm fascinated by what's going on, and it's truly crazy to see where we're at in the world right now, and I just feel like it needs to be discussed because the consequences of this are so big that it's almost impossible to comprehend. And I think the average viewer in the mainstream who just scrolls through maybe CNN or Fox News and sees stuff about this Ukraine war, I think there's a big disconnect on the support we're giving and the possible consequences of said support. Whether you want to argue that support is right or wrong, the consequences of that support could be devastating and could absolutely reshape the structure of the entire planet, and that is no sarcasm or over-exaggeration. So in covering these events are extremely important. That being said, I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody kind of watching it in awe as it unfolds before us. Another statement the NATO Secretary General said is, "I am confident that the closing statement of the NATO summit will send a positive message about Ukraine's ascension path." I don't know what that positive message is going to be because we've heard this time and time again. Where can Ukraine go with this? Where can they go? Because as we've heard time and time again, NATO has a policy where a country can't join the alliance if it's having a territorial dispute, aka it's at war with another country. They can't just tag team somebody and say, hey, we joined NATO now. By the way, we need your giant army to come take care of our problems. It was probably a wise decision to have that policy in NATO to be able to join because obviously you can see the problem of a smaller country starting some beef with another one and then joining NATO during that process and then trying to call them in and say, hey, take care of our problems, we're in NATO. So while they're at war with Russia, they can't get in NATO. That's just a fact. And although they are doing this summit to, I suppose, give Ukraine some confidence as to the direction of where they're going to go and the eventuality of them joining NATO, is that a good idea? It's hard to say. I'm going to lean towards no, that's a terrible idea. But I think this NATO summit could largely just be talking to talk because I don't really see what can be done. I really don't. They're currently in war. So, and then there's talk of these security guarantees. What are these guarantees going to look like? Are they only going to be implemented after this war is done? And we're at this very fascinating crossroads where I guess we'll dive into the cluster munitions. I'm sure you guys have heard all over the news that the cluster munitions are going to be delivered, I believe, via the United States to Ukraine. I don't claim to be a military expert as to the effectiveness of these munitions, but I do know that many countries have frowned upon them and banned them because the possibility for future civilian casualties, as these cluster munitions have a certain dud rate where, the round isn't going to go off, and then it is simply going to go off years later when a child is running across the road picking up his ball. These rounds are going to be here after the war. I mean, this just shows you the gravity of the situation. It may not seem like a big deal. Okay, there's going to be ordnance, ammunition, and explosives laying around all over this battlefield for years to come. There's still explosives going off from World War II. I believe even within the past couple months, somewhere in Europe, a mine from World War II was accidentally detonated. I think it was in the ocean, but I do believe there might have even been some injuries. So that is how many years later? Like 70, 80 years later, and there's still munitions going off. So the implications of choosing a type of munition or explosive or weapon that has such long-term consequences and duds are going to be fired and then they're going to go off down the road, it's just another factor that must be considered. And it's kind of interesting to see how, the defense I'm hearing and the rationale I'm hearing from the allied side, from the NATO, United States, UK perspective is that, well, Russia's using them, so we can too. So basically, a wrong makes a right. So they're using them, so we have to as well, and at least it'll be in the defense of Ukraine. I'm not here to argue the morality of it because I think we're kind of crossed the Rubicon in terms of morality because people are being killed, innocents on both sides. There are Russian civilians being killed. There's people in the war who don't want to be in the war, who are conscripted and being forced. There's victims on all sides, and that's the sad thing about war. It's never black and white. While it is terrible, and I mention this time and time again, and I'll never cease to mention it because it must be addressed, what Putin did is absolutely horrible. Invading Ukraine was an awful idea, and I think no matter how much he was provoked by NATO, that doesn't give you the justification from Putin's perspective. It doesn't give him the justification to be able to turn this into a kinetic, take it from a political dispute to then taking into an actual kinetic battle where he is killing, maiming, injuring thousands of people, ruining homes, cities, and leveling the place, all under the guise of, I'm here to provide freedom for these people. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. It's not really anything new. We've seen it with all the wars that happen, and it's kind of just more of the same. But the implications of this war are much different than some previous ones. This isn't like a Desert Storm or Vietnam. This has much more on the line for everybody involved, and I think that's why you see so many people arguing back and forth online about this. Because I think morally, it's not a hard argument to say, yeah, of course Ukraine deserves to be protected. Of course. I mean, like I said, innocent life being taken anywhere is an awful thing. So I see no problem with Ukraine being supported. I see it in terms of morality. I see in terms of practicality, I see it being a massive problem because we're talking about igniting a dispute that could go kinetic between the biggest nuclear superpower in the world and number two. Number one, Russia's got the most nukes. Number two, United States. So to keep that in perspective, that's kind of the underlining thread between all these arguments is that, when you see people like Senator Lindsey Graham come out with this statement for a proposed legislation on the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, if this plant, obviously, I didn't cover this last week, but I'm sure if you guys are listening to my video, you probably you listen to the news frequently enough that you saw this. The whole dispute of Ukraine says Russia is about to blow up the nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Russia says Ukraine is about to bomb it. And if it were to happen, it was going to create a giant radiological disaster, which then would trigger Article 4, potentially Article 5. Maybe even Poland decides to just jump in on their own. Seems like they're kind of itching to go at it, even if NATO didn't back them up. But you had Lindsey Graham, and I forget the other senator's name, propose this legislation, and that shows you that they're kind of ready to bang. They think that, this is an eventuality, and you constantly hear Lindsey's warmongering. He seems to be ready to go at it, and he'll be happy to send your sons and daughters to go do it. He ain't going to do it himself. You're never going to see him on the front line if this turns into World War III, but he's going to gladly send other people, and he'll be making money off the defense contractors and the bills that they sign. He'll be pocketing lovely money in the stock market, etc., and then sending you all to go die in a pointless and bloody war. And I say pointless because there's no outcome. I don't mean in terms of morality. I mean in terms of what is the ideal outcome. What is the outcome that you're looking for? Anyone who wants this war and believes that we need to just support 100% Ukraine, give them everything they need, I understand the argument, and I do agree from the morality perspective, it is right to defend people. But when you're presented with two awful options, you must pick the lesser of those two options. That's your only choice, right? If you're presented with two terrible options, you must pick the lesser of the two evils. If one option is to force some sort of treaty between Russia and Ukraine. I'm sorry, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, and we're here to talk about the summit, but I just think this is so important to cover because option one, force some sort of treaty, which almost happened before the United Kingdom, UK stepped in through Boris Johnson and halted that potential peace treaty that almost happened last year. If that's option A, and maybe Ukraine secedes some of its territory, I don't think that's an ideal situation. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's good. And I think that, you set up the mindset from Putin where, okay, I took Crimea in, what was it, 2000, I forget the year, 2008 maybe? I don't know. Or is it 2014? I can't remember. He takes Crimea and then, there's a peace treaty and then he doesn't go any farther. And then 10 years later, he goes for another part of Ukraine and then they fight for a year, then they have a peace treaty, then he takes another 20%, and then you can see this. You're basically telling him, hey, Putin, you can do this every 5 to 10 years, and we'll give you a little bit more. In 20 years, you're going to own 75% of Ukraine, So that's option A, not a good one. Option B, send the F-16, send the tanks, fuck it, send the NATO personnel, send the American soldiers, send the Polish soldiers, because we all see that's where that's going. Biden clearly stated we were never going to send tanks, we were never going to send F-16s, and here's a direct quote from the United States National Security Advisor. Washington supports sending F-16s to Ukraine. So you see what's happening. They say, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do this. X amount of months goes by. Oops, we're going to do this because we have no choice. I think Biden even mentioned on camera, live, that we're running out of munitions to provide Ukraine, and that's why we have to send the cluster munitions. So we're simultaneously provoking this beast in Russia with the most nuclear weapons in the entire world. We're draining our own stockpiles. I think they've said our ammunition and weapon stockpiles are decreasing at like a rapid rate now because we've been giving them all to Ukraine. Not here to argue if that's right or wrong, simply here to talk in terms of practicality of if that's a good idea, because as we said, option A, come up with some sort of peace treaty and basically kick the can down a few years until Putin gets angry and wants to, or whoever replaces Putin and tries to take a farther part of Ukraine, and then we have to do this whole thing again. Option B, continue to up the ante. This summit going on, let's say they come out with some security guarantees for Ukraine and say that, Ukraine joining NATO is 100% eventuality. And I believe they said that they're not going to have a timetable. They're not going to release a date on this or anything, but that it is going to be a 100% thing. Like I said, a NATO general says, I am confident that the closing statement of the NATO summit will send a positive message about Ukraine's ascension path. So option A, peace treaty, not going to be great. Option B, basically come out with a statement saying Ukraine's 100% getting in NATO, and until that happens, we're going to continue to give arms. We're going to up the ante to F-16s, to eventually there may have to be personnel, whether that's under the guise of UN peacekeepers or whatever it is. It's hard to say, but let's just say this tit for tat keeps going and going and going. Eventually, you're going to poke this bear with Russia where they're going to see no other option. Either Putin's going to be afraid to lose the war, lose power, and be overthrown, and that's going to back him into a corner where he uses either a tactical nuke or perhaps this radiological plant in Ukraine, Zaporizhia, gets blown up. Who was going to do that? I don't know. I've heard arguments for both. I've heard arguments that why would Russia do that? I've also heard arguments why would Ukraine do that? I think there's desperation on both sides right now, and the giving of the cluster munitions is evidence of that. We're reaching this point where we're just doing security package after security package. It's this weird teetering line where it's like not enough to change the outcome of the war. I think it's an eventuality that if something doesn't drastically change with NATO getting directly involved, sending personnel, etc., I think it's a hard argument to say Ukraine is going to straight up just force the Russians completely out of Ukraine. So I don't know. I'm not here to predict necessarily the end of the war. I'm just here to say it's not looking good on anybody's perspective, anybody's side. And this summit is just another step in the escalation. And as we talked about in the last episode, I think a lot of people get a little bit lost and jaded. One, because the fog of war is so thick right now. I mean, everybody thought this radiological plant, this nuclear plant, was going to blow up. And that was the talk of the town for 2 or 3 days. Both sides were accusing each other, saying even down to the date, was it July 4th, July 5th, July 6th, it was going to blow up. Nothing happened. So the fog of war is so thick, and then on top of that, the timetable isn't necessarily panning out to what many people online making content, breaking news here have thought. They thought this was either going to be a war, World War III kind of right off the bat, or that this was never going to turn into, a wider conflict. And we're kind of seeing a middle ground, right? We're seeing the escalation happening, but it's maybe not happening in the quick timely fashion that people thought. This isn't a movie. This is real life. So, both sides are weighing the consequences of this and, doing what they can. But ultimately, this summit, which is going on today and tomorrow, is only going to provoke the situation more. I don't see a benefit. I see we're at this weird point where the United States and NATO as a whole want to help, but they're trying to walk this razor-thin line of how much can we help without provoking Russia into a direct conflict. And here's the evidence right in front of you. If we do provoke Russia to a kinetic conflict with NATO or the United States, we're not ready for it conventionally. I mean, the evidence is there. We don't have the ammunition. We don't have the weaponry. We've been giving so much of it to Ukraine. We don't have the budget. We don't have the military. We don't have it. We're just not there. We're not on a wartime footing. And some may argue, well, we shouldn't be because we're not at war. Yes, but we are provoking what could potentially be the quickest and fastest way to the worst war possible, and we're not ready to do it if it does happen. And then you can throw in Taiwan in the mix and Israel, Iran, and all these other powder kegs that are yet to blow, and you have a recipe for fucking disaster. You have a recipe for disaster. I don't know the prediction to make on this. I'm just saying that this summit is another step in the direction of more people dying. And if you love Ukraine and you want Ukraine to be protected, I understand the rationale. I truly do understand, and I have empathy for everybody who's saying, we have to stop this. We have to stop Putin now. It's just a complicated, nuanced topic because you can't stop somebody this powerful in nuclear weapons without a bigger nation getting involved. And a bigger nation getting involved means World War III. There's no other way about it. And if we're not conventionally ready to fight World War III, I think Russia also is not conventionally. What does that leave on the table? Nuclear war. That's all it leaves. And I have not sat here since the beginning of this time and thought we were going to go to nuclear war. I think oftentimes if you're looking at the most ideal outcome and the worst, scariest outcome, it often sometimes lands somewhere in the middle. So I never really thought this is for sure nuclear war. I do think that a nuclear weapon could be used. Let's say from Russia's perspective, if this continues to happen, the F-16s get granted and God knows what else, the cluster munitions, et cetera, et cetera. Ukraine gets granted a guarantee on eventual NATO ascension. Let's say Russia eventually shoots one nuke off. Let's just say they shoot one nuke off to say, stop messing with us. We will take this to the next level if you want. That opens Pandora's box in a terrible way. I think that would wreck the economy. I think that would scare the shit out of everybody. I think that would probably rally NATO. NATO seems like they want the fight, even though they're not ready for it. It's very bizarre. I don't know who's making the tactical decisions in this entire conflict, but they don't have their head on straight, would be my assessment. They don't have their head on straight because what comes after all of these promises is more dead people, more war, and eventually a much wider conflict. And as I said, once it goes out of Pandora's box, it's not going back in the box. You can't put the cat back in the bag. It's going to be too late. And I would see, let's say this war pops off with Russia and NATO, you better believe that Taiwan and China are going to go at it, Israel, Iran are going to go at it, and this is going to be a powder keg across the entire world. I wouldn't say that's conspiracy theory. I think there's plenty of evidence through World War I and World War II to be able to see the domino effect of how these things start. They start off with a regional conflict, then it escalates. Bigger partners get involved, bigger countries get involved with a smaller conflict. And then before you know it, you've got something that is changing the absolute face of the world. That's where my interest in this really lies, was stemming from World War II, how much it changed everybody's lives, even down to the individual, down to the way we govern, down to everything. World War II changed everything, and World War III is going to change everything exponentially more than that. So there's just so much going on. I'm sure I've missed some stuff. We didn't even cover the Prigozhin coup in Russia and what that was about. I've heard so much speculation. I initially almost made a video about it when it first happened because I was so curious where it was going to go. Was this actually a civil war and a coup? Could this depose Putin? Was this funded through the West? We never got answers. Prigozhin just met with Putin a couple of days ago, so we have no fucking clue, and we may never know. Is it possible that the West tried to pay Prigozhin, and Prigozhin promised he was going to try to overthrow Putin, and then he pocketed that money and went running right back to daddy? Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if that's the truth. Maybe we're in conspiracy land to talk about that. I do not know. But there's so much going on right now, and it's just more of the same. That's why I haven't really been covering it on a daily basis. It's just more of the same. Tit for tat, tit for tat. We slowly go down the road holding hands to our destruction. And I don't sit here with any answers. I don't know the answer. I really don't. I think that you got to make a deal with the devil there and do some sort of peace treaty. But I do admit that making that deal only pushes the can farther down the road and probably instigates Putin to try to go for it, to restock and rearm and go for it again in a couple of years, take another 20%, and now you have the same problem. And, so there's no easy way out of this conflict. But I think that encouraging Ukraine with these promises of, that would be my cat, maybe you guys heard him, encouraging Ukraine with the security guarantees and with the NATO ascension, I don't know if it's going to produce the outcome that NATO wants. I think that both sides are digging in their heels, and thank God it hasn't gone kinetic between NATO and Russia yet, but I don't know if we're going to remain so lucky, guys. I really don't. I think that it's absolutely fascinating that it hasn't happened. I think there's a lot. I think the public is looking at this without a lot of the full scope of the information. I think we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And if we did, maybe our opinion would change on a lot of this. But I do think it's fascinating that so far war hasn't broken out. There's a little bit of optimism that could be placed on that. Maybe these countries know more than we do, and maybe they're talking behind the scenes. And even if this somehow did go kinetic, it would stay conventional. I don't know. We've just never seen nuclear powers go at it. This is the first time in human history. So we're stepping into uncharted territory, and it just scares the bejesus out of me to see people like Lindsey Graham and Dmitry Medvedev on the Russian side, and all these people just ready to go. They're itching to go, and yet they're not the ones who are going to die. They're the ones who are going to send, the average citizen to go pay the price for this. So war is hell, man. War is hell, and all we can do is hope for the best and prepare for the worst. I don't even know how you prepare for something like this. I know there's a lot of preppers out there getting their canned goods and their weapons and all that. I think that this war changes if it does happen, this World War III scenario, I think it changes the absolute scope of humanity for generations. It's going to make World War II look like a skirmish, so I don't even know if there's a way to prepare for this, but I can totally understand the desire and the need to prepare on an individual level to protect yourself, protect your family, but it's just crazy times, man. What else can I say? It's crazy times. Let's go through a couple reactions about all these events. Jude Biggs on YouTube says, it's looking more as I thought. To predict what will happen, all you have to do is think, what should they not do? And that's what they will do. They gamble the earth for what? We want these loveless idiots ruling the earth? ? Yeah, 100%. It does seem like anything logical, anything that could potentially lead us to a peace deal, anything that could potentially diffuse this or reduce tensions or reduce death. And they go the exact opposite. They dig their heels in. And they do the opposite of what somebody who was trying to protect the lives that they're in charge of protecting would do. They do the damn opposite every single time. And it just makes you wonder. I mean, it shows you that their intentions aren't what they say. If their intentions were to protect everybody and they want us all to be holding hands in peace, and they wouldn't be stoking conflict, they'd be trying to find any possible way, any possible off-ramp to this conflict, and I'm seeing none of that. I'm seeing everything the opposite. So I agree with Jude Biggs completely. Tim Howell 7362 says, I can't wait to watch the announcement and the reaction of a draft in woke America. Yeah. Me and my buddy were talking about this the other day. What would it look like if a draft happened here? Because I know you guys have probably heard that our recruitment numbers in America for the military are like a record low right now. They're doing awful, and I think there's numerous reasons for that, down to the leadership, down to the politics they're injecting into the military. There's a lot of reasons, and down to the conflicts that are being stoked. This isn't like America defending its homeland. This is like America going thousands and thousands of miles away, potentially to defend, Taiwan and Ukraine. And I'm not speaking from morality. I'm speaking from practicality. I don't know how many people want to sign up for those wars. I really don't. And if a draft were to get implemented, me and my buddy were talking about this, I think that it would look so much worse than the domestic turmoil that was happening from Vietnam. I think the fallout from a potential draft here is going to be catastrophic. I think it could even be society collapsing in a way, because I think that my generation and the younger generations would revolt rather than go to war to defend this administration, to defend these policies. Like I said, this isn't a defensive war. America can sit here and say that this is our moral high ground, and we're doing this from the goodness of our hearts. I think, as I mentioned in the last episode, I think it's crazy to believe that. I think the evidence suggests that we're very selective with who we want to support, and there's more than meets the eye on this one, guys. And I don't know what the reason why we're actually supporting them in. I don't know what it is. I truly don't. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I just don't know. I just don't think that these guys are doing it from the goodness of their heart. I think there's some sort of plan going on here. I think that the fog of war is thick, and the American public just doesn't have all the cards. Well, I should say the public at whole, the entire world, just doesn't really know the true intentions behind why this is happening. That's my opinion. But yeah, if a draft happens here, man, you can expect it to be you can expect it to be bad here. That's what I would think. I don't think people are going to sign up for this draft unless there was some sort of Pearl Harbor type incident, 9/11 type incident that inspires, the public to feel that they're directly defending the American national interests. Other than that, I don't think people are too eager to sign up for wars anymore. I don't think so, man. I think that the social media news has really showed and opened the door to the industrial military complex. People see through the crap now. And while we may not be able to stop it, we can't stop it. We're kind of just watching it like a car crash, and there's nothing you can do. It doesn't mean people are going to join up. I think people would rather revolt and protest and avoid the draft rather than go to war. That's what I think. Could be wrong. We'd have to see. If Pearl Harbor incident happened, it could change everything. So that being said, I don't know if Russia or China would be dumb enough to do something like that. You hear the rumors, conspiracy talk of them shutting down the power grid with a cyber attack. Something like that could definitely stoke the fervor of the American opinion into getting into this war, definitely. So we'd have to see. Crazy Heathen says when war is declared, everything changes. 100%, man. And that's why I think this is so scary, and I think people need to be careful what they wish for, careful what they talk about. I think these senators need to be fucking careful, because when war actually happens, it changes everything, man. We're sitting on one side of the fence talking about something that humanity has never seen. We've never seen a big war between two superpowers that have nuclear weapons. It's never happened. So these guys get on camera and they talk so confidently, like they know what they're talking about, like they know the outcome of what this could lead to. They know the repercussions, and they know that we're ready for it. They're crazy, dude. They're fucking crazy politicians, and that's why I feel if you're supporting any politician this day, man, that politician better be wanting peace, and they better be diffusing this, because anybody who wants the opposite, man, I understand the different arguments. I truly do, and I'm not an authority. I'm just here to say, don't underestimate the consequences. Everything changes when war is declared. Everything would change. So Nabs5538 says, I need to leave the UK, man. A small island very close to Russia with no bunkers and a government who are inept and don't care about us. Yeah, man, the UK government don't care about its citizens. The American government doesn't care about its citizens, and that's evident because they're dragging us into a conflict that's potentially going to eviscerate us all. And they're marching lockstep. They're going full speed ahead, all gas, no brakes on this. Anyone who wants peace and anyone who talks about anything other than 100% agreement with this conflict is deemed as some sort of a traitorous heathen with, outdated, old, and ignorant views on the world. So it's awful, man. No nuance is allowed. No true speculation is allowed. You just kind of got to march, lock hands and just march towards the inevitable outcome, and that's what they want. So, yeah, I think it's very true. The governments don't give a shit about any of us. They never have. They never will. Sorry to be negative, and if you have a more optimistic take, I'd love to hear it, but I think the evidence points in the contrary. Erlin's call says humanity has truly deserved its Armageddon, the governments because they want it, the subjects because they don't prevent it or didn't prevent it. I don't agree with that. The governments, yes, I think most of the governments around the world, I'm not saying everybody in the government, there's probably plenty of good people. Nothing's black and white in this world, but I think largely the people in the highest points of all these governments, yeah, a lot of them are evil, power hungry. They're, at the very least, they're just insane, and they're not equipped to be able to do the job, And so deserving its Armageddon, I don't know if I agree with that, because that's a small amount of people in control of very large decisions that affect the whole world. I think and then he mentions the subjects, us. So the citizens deserve it because they didn't prevent it. I'd love to hear your opinion on how on earth we do prevent it. You can't vote these people out of power. We didn't vote on this war. So it's not a democratic way to be able to solve this. And you can't, you can't do anything. How can you organize? What can you do to stop this war from happening? There's literally nothing you can do. And yes, we are in a quote unquote democracy, or as close to democracy as there is. They're still in charge, and we're not. And you can complain about it on Twitter, you can protest, you can do this and that, but ultimately at the end of the day, these guys are in charge. And if they agree in a bipartisan nature for a war, I don't know what can be done. Yes, I've heard everybody can go on strike, stop working, stop the industries from moving, and show the politicians that we don't want this war. I understand. I just think the ability to organize something of that scope and that scale is I'm not going to say impossible, but I don't see it happening. I think that it's It's complicated, man. It's complicated, but I'm not going to say that the citizens deserve it because they didn't stop it. These are powerful people in the tops of our governments making decisions that affect all of us. And while it is a quote unquote democracy, that doesn't mean that the citizens have a right. Well, they have a right, but I'm saying they don't actually get to say like you would ideally want. In a perfect world, we'd be able to all sit down and vote today and find some peace treaty as a whole and stop funding this and somehow get Russia out of Ukraine. But that's not the world we live in. This is real world, and it's messy and it's sloppy, and there's no perfect solution. So I don't think that humanity deserves Armageddon. I just think that something's got to give, something's got to change. And I think that the world yings and yangs, and right now we're kind of going like zombies towards this conflict. And the only thing that's going to wake up the world is probably some sort of disaster happening and people getting a little sneak preview of what World War III would look like, whether that be Putin shooting one nuke off or a cyber attack happening. Something bad is going to have to happen for people to wake up. And I think that's sad, but that tends to be how humanity is. Kind of after World War I happened, they say, oh, no war ever again. Was it 20 years later, World War II happens. World War II happens, oh, no war ever again. The cycle continues, man, and the weapons just get worse. Humans are humans, and while we do evolve, it's not in one human lifetime. It's over the course of a long period of time, and I don't know how much time we have left if these guys keep tracking us down to this inevitable outcome. Hopefully an off-ramp is found, but hard to say. Wrapping up here, we'll do a couple more. Road Rules 3671 says things are starting to accelerate and come to a head. Good luck to everyone out there. Our world, as we know, is about to change forever. I hope not, buddy. I hope it's not. I hope I'm wrong, but I've thought this was coming for quite some time. I think things don't often turn out the way you expect, so there's plenty of options that could happen that we don't even foresee as possibilities right now. A conventional war between Russia and the United States that doesn't go nuclear. Somehow a peace treaty could be met with, let's say, a new administration comes into office in the American government next year, and then somehow that government's able to find a peace treaty. That's possible. Russia decides it wants to give up the fight. I suppose that's possible. I'm not saying these are likely outcomes. I'm just speaking on possibilities. So there's possibilities, but it does seem like the world's about to change. It feels like something big's a brewing, doesn't it? Maria Sartes 4417 says, I have a feeling a lot of us, me included, are just getting jaded at this point. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. It's bad. We're all jaded because we don't know what's truth. We don't know what's false. The fog of war is thick. The misinformation is heavy. We don't know nothing about nothing, and we're just kind of sitting here on the roller coaster waiting for the hill. We're going up the hill, and it's about to drop, and nothing you can do about it. Can't really hop off the ride, can you? Z. Kali says, if the war hasn't even begun, then we need to stop funding this. Our people need help now. How much more are we going to send once it begins? I know I'm not the only one sick of us sending billions and billions to them. Enough already. It's not easy, man. I think if you knew a Ukrainian, if you'd been to Ukraine, your heart would open up to the fact that they're getting decimated. I saw an awful video a few weeks back of a baby he was injured. I believe it survived, but he was injured from one of the airstrikes that Putin did on one of the residential cities. So you see something like that, and it's hard to just say black and white. Don't send them money. Don't send them weapons. How on earth could you be human and see innocent life getting killed and injured and their houses and buildings getting destroyed and not want to help? It's a natural human instinct. But that being said, helping is going to potentially take a conflict that's losing hundreds of thousands of lives and turning it into one that's losing hundreds of millions. So that's why I say, what's the lesser of two evils? And are you able to pick between one of the two? Because not picking is picking. If this doesn't stop, we see we see where it's going to lead if it doesn't stop. So not choosing is choosing in this situation. Logic Z Chance 101 says everything's moving too slowly. They should just get it started and over with, so whoever remains can move on in whatever fashion they can or are able to. That's a depressing thought. They should just get it started and over with. I guess I can understand the sentiment of like the anxiety of just sitting here for the last year being like, is this going to happen? Do I go to work? Do I go on with my normal life? Or are we all going to be in war soon and get drafted or, have nuclear fallout above our houses? I understand the sentiment, but careful what you wish for, buddy. I don't think you want it truly to get started and get over with. I think we want it to not happen at all. that would be the better outcome, yeah. Floyd Brennan 9789 says the whole situation is like a completely out of control freight train with no brakes going down a steep grade. There's no stopping it. 100% I agree. It doesn't matter if we're in a constitutional republic or whatever the hell you want to call it, representative government, democracy, parliament, whatever government in the world can't stop this, because when these guys get lockstep and the military-industrial complex meets up with politics, meets up with an agenda, meets up with a potential conflict, good luck. Good luck from stopping it. The public outcry would have to be so intense, so drastic that it would have to halt. It would have to halt the normal function of society. It would have to be that big of a deal for it to actually have a consequence to be able to stop it, because these people are in power and there ain't no stopping them. So could we see that kind of domestic turmoil? Yeah, we could. Like I said, if something big happens and people really get to wake up and see what a nuke does, we haven't seen those since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I think people largely forget, maybe even the people that are at the helm of these weapons, they forget the damage it does. All you got to do is watch a documentary, listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, what's it called, his Armageddon episode, I forget the name of it, Blueprint to no, that's World War I. I forget the name of it, but he has a whole thing about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he has one all about the power of nuclear weapons and are humans able to deal with that power. I would love for all the governments from both Russia, China, United States, UK, everywhere, Ukraine, everybody to sit down and watch a couple documentaries on what's it look like when a nuke goes off, how it affects people, and maybe it'll wake these guys up, because I don't think they realize it, or either they don't realize it, or they've got a plan we don't know about. They got some bunkers we don't know about, and they plan on sending us to war and then hiding out and waiting for the thing to turn over. So rough times, guys. That's why I like doing the UFC chats, because sometimes this shit can get heavy with World War III talk, and God only knows. I hope nothing happens. I hope for some way, somehow, Russia is evicted out of Ukraine and there's a peace deal that's able to be made, and this war doesn't escalate. But I think, unfortunately, every sign is pointing to the opposite of that right now. It could change. We have to pray that it changes. But until then, just buckle up, man. This summit's going to be over tomorrow, and we'll see what's going to happen. But I don't know, man. Crazy times. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Once again, just do me a favor. If you like the video, hit subscribe on my YouTube channel. Hit like on the video. That helps me out a lot. Be able to grow this thing. If you're listening on the podcast apps, just hit follow. Hit a 5-star review. I really appreciate that. And then lastly, but not leastly, please join the Discord at Mixed Martial Arts. It's in the description on this video. It's on the About section on my YouTube page. Join it. It's called Mixed Martial Arts. We have 3 chat groups, one for UAP, one for UFC, and one for World War III. I'm going to be breaking news in there every day with articles, and we can talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. I love to talk about this stuff, but more than that, I love to interact with other people who also are fascinated and enamored by following these subjects. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be getting out another episode to you shortly. I hope you all have a good day. Stay safe.